Dear friends, Namaskar. Today we are bringing you the hot topic of global Hindu phobia and the atrocities around the world on Hindu community, Sanatanis. And we have very distinguished guests with us, Pandit Satish Sharma ji from London and Rashmi Samant ji from Bangalore, India. She was in Oxford, and we all know what happened to her. So let me welcome Pandit Satish Sharma ji and Rashmi Sawant ji. We have also Mr. Hirdesh Gupta ji to assist me and to ask questions to the distinguished guests. Namaste and welcome to the show, sir and ma'am.
Pranam Arif bhai, Namaskar ji, Jai Shri Ram and Rashmi ji, Pranam to you. Great to see you.
Uh,
Likewise, namaste.
And we mustn't forget Hirdesh ji, who we can't see at the moment, but a pleasure to be connected with you also, Hirdesh ji. And Jai Shri Ram to everybody.
Panditji, before going to question, I would like to take your views on current situation of Hindu phobia around the world.
It's a wonderful place to start. I think one thing that has happened is that Hindus have now started to speak about what's been done to them. It's always been bubbling away in the background. Here in the United Kingdom, we have been aware of this. Rashmiji's case is a very well-known and high-profile one, but it's happening on a daily basis. And the level of its common presence is so much so that we had forgotten to even notice it. We had learned how to put up with it. It's like a stone in your shoe. You know, after a while, if you can't get rid of it, you just walk along and hobble along in a little bit of pain, but carrying on your journey. But what has happened now is that Hindus everywhere have felt that this is it's extremely difficult to avoid. It's increasing on a daily basis. And the more we speak about it, the more the resistance is appearing. So people who were quietly inflicting Hindu phobia on us, they're now becoming more vocal. And I think we're going to see this happen much, much more. I've been noticing a couple of things which are quite commonplace now. And the search for a solution, the search for understanding is something that's part of us, isn't it? Why is this happening? And we start to analyze the problem. And there is one dimension which I think really stands out now. And I'd like to have your opinion on it, Arif bhai. And that is that Hindus have been on the receiving end of colonization, violent colonization for a long period of time. It's never been acknowledged. We had two waves of colonization. One was the attempt to Arabianize the Indian continent and introduce Arabic culture. And then we had the attempt to Europeanize and introduce the European value system. And both of those periods were horrific, traumatic. They were periods in which crimes against humanity were committed without any acknowledgement, not then and not now. And the people who engaged in those and the ideologies which engaged in those and which then used their hatred, their violence to establish power, they're not happy for Hindus to now start talking about their history. Every time a Hindu says, Gauri did this, and Churchill did this, etc., all of these established power bases are saying, no, we don't want you to talk about it. If the Hindu talks about Islamic terrorism, immediately it's, no, Hindu phobia, Islamophobia, let's just stop the conversation. They want to kill the conversation, and we have to have these conversations now. So this is the common strand I'm beginning to detect, and that's a strand that I hope we'll get a chance to explore a bit more today.
Thank you, sir. Rashmi ji, we would like to hear your opening statement on this topic, please.
Namaste, Arif and thank you very much for having me on the show. And Jai Shri Ram to everyone. I think my opening statement would be that I definitely do agree with everything that Pandit ji just said before me, and just add on to the fact that speaking about Hindu persecution has become a taboo in society right now. I've noticed it personally because I've been very vocal about the whole situation, not just in Bangladesh, but also in Pakistan. And I keep talking about it on all of my platforms, even when there are no news articles about these issues, taking clippings from local newspapers and so on and so forth, and based on my contacts with ground level activists in these countries. So I notice a common thread that every time I speak about a genuine case with facts and backed up maybe sometimes with articles, people just come there and dismiss it as a fake propaganda news or whatever, something of that sort. And nobody wants to accept the fact that there is persecution of Hindus or that these incidents, which are real, are happening. I mean, if you look at the official census figures, you can see that the Hindu population has dropped from almost 22% to 8%. So whatever we are talking about Hindu persecution in Bangladesh has to be true because even their official count of population, points to that fact. So there's a clear denial, and this denial stems from hate for the Hindu community and nothing else. And it's a way in which they establish and they, continue their superiority and their abuse of this abuse of Hindus that's been going on for a really long time now.
Thank you, Rashmi ji. Pandit ji, coming to you, as we have noticed that uh, Islamic extremism is on rise. In Pakistan right now, Islamists are having pitch battle with security forces. Number of casualties on both sides, security forces and Islamists. Uh, Minorities persecution goes on in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and elsewhere. But we don't see international community, international media exposing these atrocities by Islamists. But when it comes to Hindu phobia, when it comes to Hindutva, Hindu extremism, they continuously report, mass reporting by international media houses like New York Times and Time Magazine, Washington Post, international forces, like British MP was killed by an Islamist. Not a single MP talk about it, but there were so many MPs coming to parliament and speaking on growing Hindutva and Hindu extremism, while not a single person was killed on the basis of religion by Hindus. What is your take on this, sir?
Isn't it a shock? Isn't it surprising to us? You know, one of the most difficult things is that a person who is reasonable, it takes them a long time to understand how unreasonable people think and function. You know, we spend so much time trying to think, ye kya hua, ye kaise hua, how can this be? It doesn't make sense to us because we're sensible people. But now we have to make sense of it and understand what's happening. And the hypocrisy you have mentioned is so undeniable that we have to start to call out those people who are hypocritical. So let's just build on the example that you've just mentioned. You know, we know that Pakistan was created as a garrison state by the British, right? They created that state. They created East Pakistan. It was known, if you look at the drivers behind the Direct Action Day, everybody knew that there were ideological reasons behind why the Muslim community at that time were killing the Hindu community in such numbers. The ethnic cleansing of Hindus out of Pakistan and of East Pakistan, or Bangladesh as it's now known, didn't happen this year. It didn't start last year. It has been continuously in process ever since the British created these two nations out of Bharat. India is not a British creation. It used to be there for a long, long time. Out of India, two new nations were created. The birth of that nation didn't happen in 47. It happened millennia ago. And so we need to start to think about these things with a historical context. The British created a state in which the lie that Muslims in India were unsafe, and so they needed a separate state for them. That was the lie that was told to the world. The evidence on the ground completely challenges that statement and proves that it's a lie. We had 23% in Pakistan in terms of Hindus in 47, and now it's less than 1%. If we have a look at the statistics for Bangladesh, Rashmiji has just shared those, down to 8%. And an American professor presented data to the American Congress in which he asserted that in the region of 45 million Hindus were missing from the demographics of Bangladesh over a period of time. That is such a huge figure. The reason that our politicians in this country, I think, don't address this directly and with honesty and integrity is they know that their hands are not clean. That's one reason. They know that their history and their role in breeding vipers, breeding snakes in other people's backyards is now coming back to bite them. We call this Gadma, but they have to face this. They have to acknowledge this. The other aspect that you just raised with regard to what happened in the United Kingdom, isn't it incredible? We have the BBC, for example, which will happily publish an article which says how Jai Shri Ram became a cry of war. Okay? And yet they have never and would never say how Allahu Akbar became a cry of war, even though the use of the two phrases in acts of violence, statistically, there is a huge difference between the two. But the BBC won't say it because it's part of the British state. Parliament is part of the British state. I think one of the biggest problems that the British government have is they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They are the ones who have been supporting extremism in many theatres around the world for a long period of time. It's not I would say that ISIS, when you look at an ISIS column, they don't drive ambassadors. They drive Humvees made in America. These don't just suddenly appear out of the desert. There has to be a supply chain to equip them, provide them, and locate them. And Europe has been party to that. I think the British ruling class and the British public are asking the same questions that you are now asking. Why is it that white British girls can be abused in so many towns where the local political authorities are heavily influenced by Islamism, and yet those white girls have no access to justice? Even after all this period, nobody is answering the questions. Why didn't the police protect them? These are systemic infrastructural problems in the United Kingdom. But as people who are also British citizens, we have to demand that the British government acts to protect our rights, but also acts to uphold values and defend values that we too believe in. And the British government, as British citizens, they have an obligation to protect everybody along this basis. If they don't, then they're revealed to be amongst the worst liars in humanity. I mentioned the other day that they attacked Iraq on the basis of very shaky evidence that Saddam Hussein had been attacking his own people with chemical weapons. And most people don't know, but the first people to use chemical weapons actually in a theatre of war were the British. The British were the first to use chemical weapons on a civilian population. They attacked Saddam Hussein on that basis. And yet, if you look at the atrocities that have been inflicted on the people of Bangladesh, and it's not by coincidence that in 22 districts, violence suddenly, on an instant, flares up and Hindus are attacked everywhere. This is not just an accident. This is by planning, this is premeditation. And so the Bangladeshi government knew this. And the British have an obligation to approach the Bangladeshi state in the same way that they approach the Iraqi state. Otherwise, they are shown to be hypocrites.
Thank you, sir. Rashmi ji, Kashid ji is saying that kudos to Rashmi ji for standing up to the left bullies. Hope this will galvanize the Hindus around the world in this civilizational fight. My question is that tell us about your experience at Oxford. People around the world, students, young people around the world, they've come to Oxford with a dream and with expectations. What happened to you and how you overcame all these?
Well, I think it was a textbook example of what happens to Hindus and how unprepared we are for such situations. I've traveled a ton. I have lived abroad before, but I've, because media is so, partial in covering Hindu issues, that as a global citizen, I was unaware of such incidences, or that they happen so frequently and with such intensity. So here I am, an Oxford student and a newly elected president, not expecting in the, in the wildest of my dreams about, about what's to come, and then everything breaks loose, and then I was taken aback. I was taken by surprise because definitely the media has done a great job in covering up Hindu issues and how Hindus go through these things. So you would only expect young people or the community in general to be unaware. And it took me a while to even come to terms with what was happening with me and why people were saying the things that they were saying. Initially, I was internalizing a lot of these comments, and thinking that maybe, oh, this, maybe I've done something wrong or something like that, because being a good Hindu, being a Sanatani, you internalize everything. You think the world is a great place, and that nobody has any ill intention beyond their that they don't have any evil intentions. And then after a point, I reached the conclusion that, but this doesn't make any sense. And I was fortunate enough to come across good people, including Panditji here, who have first-hand faced these things in Britain, and they were able to break it down to me that, listen, this is not something that you need to internalize. It's no fault of yours, but an existing phenomena, and that hate against Hindus does exist, and you were simply a victim of that, and you don't need to internalize any of it, or try to think of it as any of your personal shortcomings. And that's when I realized what was going on and galvanized, and bring myself together. It actually gave me a lot of confidence, because when you know that you're right and you've done no mistake, it gives you a lot of confidence. And despite the fact that we were heavily short on resources and the people against us were all a part of a well oiled ecosystem, we were still able to make a lot of headway and achieve whatever we wanted to achieve. That is justice by the end of the day. And it only went on to say that Satyamev Jayate, but with the right proactive measures. So Hindus do need to take the concept of Satyamev Jayate a little further and actually proactively take measures to fight back. And when they do, irrespective of the limitation of their resources or maybe the number of people who are actually fighting on the other side, we can actually win because we've got the essence on our side. And the universe is fortunately tilted in a way to benefit truth and light above all. So I think this is my message and my learning by the end of the day, that first there is a lack of awareness, and people are ignorant about the situation. So, usually people dismiss this as some sort of a made up situation, or, they generally don't accept it and they dismiss it as something false because they don't know about it. There's lack of awareness. And second, there is a lack of will to fight because we think the universe will set everything in order on its own. It might, but it'll take a really long time, and that time might lead to some internalized trauma for the person, for the individual. So it's better to, initiate a fight for justice in your own personal capacity, and it will always bear fruits, and you will always meet good people on the way because you've got the right intent.
Arif Bhai, if I may add just one thing, a small observation about Rashmiji. I remember when it all started and my very first conversation with her, I asked her, have you got the courage to fight this fight? Because if you have, then we will all join in. But if halfway you're going to start worrying about what's the university going to do, are you going to get your grades? If you're going to worry about all of those things, it's best that we don't get in the fight. But I remember her saying, yes, I will fight this. I want to fight this because it's wrong. And just that one decision, a small decision by a lone young Hindu girl in Oxford, just think of the impact of what has happened as a result of that. That one decision led to a huge amount of light being cast on Oxford. Oxford was shown a mirror, and people the world over were saying to Oxford, look at yourself. Ye aapka asli roop hai. And now children all over the world have derived so much encouragement and courage to believe that actually what happened with Rashmi could also happen with me. And if that happens, then I will also do the same thing, because the world has changed just because of that one small decision. And that's what courage does. Courage is contagious and it changes things. So I always said that, Rashmiji, if you hadn't said that and decided to dig in and say, I'm going to stand here, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we did. And I think it was a massive, massive decision that I'll always have a huge amount of respect for you for.
I totally echo what you said, Panditji and Rashmiji. Rashmiji, to be very frank, I was not knowing you before this incident happened to you. You have shown the courage, you have fought it, and be what made aware that yes, if we are stand with the truth, we will win this race. And you are the best example, and you are a big inspiration and encouragement for all of us. So really appreciate, and that is giving us the fight. Yes, we can do that if we are on the right side. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you guys to be so appreciative. Thank you very much.
Let me welcome Bharat ki beti Gayatri ji and Bharat ka beta Manish ji. I would first come to Hirdesh ji. Hirdesh ji is a part of Reach Parivar. Hirdesh ji, what is Reach up to in this fight for Sanatanis and Bharat in overall? How do you see it, and what is your question to our distinguished guests?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Arif ji. So all about Reach. Reach is a group created by Indian diaspora based out in UK, and this came in inception as 2 years ago when you know that the few of the Pakistanis and the Islamists attacked our Indian High Commission in London, and they have thrown the eggs and they have created a bit of mess. So on the 5th of September on 2019, we went there and we have cleaned up the High Commission, and we have done the Swachh Bharat thing in UK. And that point of time, it came in our mind that we should do something. There's lots of things are increasing, and their atrocity is increasing day by day. So we should do. So we all are individual working professional who came together and said, okay, let's raise our voice. Anything which is being made up or is not true, we will counter it, we will fight it, and we will talk about all the positivity. And we want to raise our voice, and that's all about Reach. And Reach came together, and this idea is like by many thousands of people, and they are joined together, and we are reaching. So, and that's where we are providing the platform to all our distinguished guests to come and share their ideas, so we can get inside of it, and we can motivate others also and take it forward. So that's the whole objective of Reach.
And your question to distinguished guests.
Yeah. So my question to Satish ji, especially, we see there's a recent violation is happening in Bangladesh, and there are lots of social media, and people are the minority, especially Hindu, are feeling very scary there, and they're having safety concern. And other side, we see that some in India, we are raising, individual person is raising their voice, but we can't see anything strongly coming from government of India. I'm not sure what's happening in the back door and the diplomacy point of view, but there's the Indian government not taking any stand.
It is the $10 million question that everybody asking is at the moment, isn't it? And there are a lot of people who are complaining, and the discontent with what seems to be inactivity from the Indian government is rising. I think all of those are fair statements. I'm not in any way a spokesperson for the government, but I am, like every person of Indian origin, a student of how they work, what they have done, and I know the challenges that the BJP government faces. Somebody once said the BJP government is in office, but they are not in power. You know, when you have had a group who are in power for 65, 68 years, they create the whole ecosystem. The whole delivery of services by the government to the people has to go through an ecosystem, a civil service. And what I have seen is that there are so many times where a great initiative will come out from the BJP, but in order for that initiative to work through and actually create a result, achieve something, the BJP has to fight not only people who don't want it to be successful outside of the borders, but people and this ecosystem who don't want it to be successful inside the borders, and certainly inside the public infrastructure. So what I've noticed happens, and this is the only way I understood it, is in that scenario, if you have a government which wants to achieve something, it has to do it in as quiet a way as possible in order to prevent people within the country actually preventing it from happening. You know, the loudest cries against anything that's good that the BJP does comes from within India, comes from a very large number of people who are so unhappy that their very comfortable life, which they had got through not necessarily legitimate means, is now being scrutinized, and they are having to account for their ill-gotten gains. They're very unhappy. We're seeing what's happening in Bollywood. Again, very loud voices, they're very unhappy. So I'm still very, very patient, and I'm waiting for the results to actually have a chance to come to fruition. I would say I am disappointed that our the spokespeople, especially the Indian Prime Minister, have not remarked or not made a comment purely and solely on the basis of human rights about what's happening to Hindus in Bangladesh. No matter how good a scheme or a plan you are working on in the background, no matter what diplomatic channels you are using, you have to be able to say that a Hindu's life is at least as equal to a non-Hindu's life, especially when it's a majority Hindu population which have given you your mandate for governing. There's no reason why that statement couldn't be made. And that is the one area where I'm a little bit concerned. But as I say, so much good has been done by the BJP since it came in. And it is the best thing is it's created a safe space for all of us Sanatanis to start to talk about ourselves. It's almost like we've been under pressure, um, living in a greater sense of atmospheric pressure than anybody else. So we've always been kept down, but that's been lifted. And so our nature and our capacity to actually do things ourselves is developing. We're becoming stronger in terms of engaging with India and India's dream and Bharat and everything else. That is a massive achievement of the BJP. And so I think they have earned from us the right for us to give them enough time to try and do something without us criticizing them too heavily. Accountability is fine, but I don't believe in criticizing somebody unless you have got the facts and evidence in front of you. But it would be so encouraging for every Hindu, for the Prime Minister of the only Hindu nation, ancestrally and at this moment in time and for the future, to come out and say something for those Hindus to feel, yes, we do have support from a government somewhere in the world. If it's not from the BJP in Bharat, then who else is going to follow that lead? I agree completely with what you're saying.
Thank you, Satish ji. I agree, but I think that Indian government is somewhere in contact with Bangladeshi government, and they are putting a pressure on Bangladeshi government as Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina Wajid, has strictly taken action against these things, and I hope that something will come up. Let me introduce Bharat ki beti Gayatri ji. Gayatri ji, thank you very much. As we know that you are also fighting like a Yodha on social media for the cause of Bharat and Sanatan. Uh, how do you see all this, and what is your question for our participants? Your mic is off. Mic.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes,
Hello?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, yeah, and Namaste Panditji and Rashmiji, who has been very voicing out for Hindus, and I have, like, we have been following their tweets. Yes, what I have seen is that Hindu persecution, no, very limited voices coming out on this Hindu persecution that is being happening in Bangladesh. And we have been, if anybody voices out, they are terming us, I mean, Hindu phobic agents are terming us as political extremists. So how would like what would you suggest on how should our approach be that our brothers and sisters, those Hindus who are facing these atrocities, can be addressed, how the issues can be addressed from a national perspective? That's what I wanted to know from Panditji.
Ji, my suggestion is very straightforward, and before I get to it, Gayatri Ji, Pranam Namaskar, and again, I salute all of the activism and the work that you're doing in the Twitter space and in other spaces. People are beginning to hear, they are beginning to understand, so please do continue with ever increased energy and commitment. But turning to this particular question, we have to, as a Hindu community, as a global Hindu community, we have to ignore what the British created. The British were great at drawing lines on maps, okay? And those lines on maps only have value when everybody buys into the scheme. But the reality was that there was a massive land where Hindus had lived peaceably with Hindus and non-Hindus for thousands of years. And what happened is imaginary lines were drawn and Hindus were told, this is no longer your land. This land belongs to somebody else. And we said, okay, fair enough, in the interests of peace, so be it, we don't mind, right? Please, hopefully they'll be happy in their homes and we can be happy in our homes. But what we have seen very clearly is that Pakistan is not a democratic state. It has never been a democratic state. It's not possible in a theocratic state for minorities of other ideologies to be safe. It's completely impossible. The ideologies themselves prevent that from happening. And what we're witnessing is Bangladesh is becoming another Pakistan in terms of its substance, in terms of its fabric, in terms of its mind. The loudest voices in Bangladesh are the same voices which were loud in 71 and needed to be challenged physically. They're the same voices we hear coming out of the Pakistani administration. And they are voices of theocracy. They are voices of religious extremism. So the very nature of Bangladesh is changing. Now, the question is, what can we do to stop it moving in that direction? I don't believe that we are going to see any change whatsoever from the Bangladeshi government unless the wider world starts to speak of economic sanctions. Every Hindu in every country should be speaking to their parliamentarians or their representatives in Congress and saying, you have to impose economic sanctions on Bangladesh, otherwise it will not change. And we have seen enough duplicity coming from the Pakistani media machine. We're going to see the same from the Bangladeshi one. The more extreme it becomes, the more Islamist it becomes. And so it's not enough to hear government ministers saying, we regret terribly what's happening to Hindus in Bangladesh. If that's all they do, then they are denying us the right to the benefit of the authority and power that they have. There should be parliamentarians who say, it's terrible what's happening to Hindus in Bangladesh. We have seen the genocide of Hindus over the last 30 years, and so we must move to actually impose sanctions. They can do this. The moment they did this, can you imagine Bangladesh's textile industry, how much exporting is done, how much cotton comes out of Bangladesh, how many goods are produced out of Bangladesh? The moment the international community said, we're going to impose economic sanctions unless you protect your minorities, not just Hindus, but other minorities, I guarantee you, then we would see a shift in attitude. You can't deal with a bully by educating them alone. You also need to be able to stop their bullying before change occurs. So I would say to everybody in every constituency, speak to your representatives, get them to reconsider any foreign aid that they're giving, and require your parliamentarians to tell you why there are no economic sanctions. They leapt to impose economic sanctions against Iraq. They leap to use economic sanctions in other nations. Why not use economic sanctions to prevent atrocities for Hindus? I think it's a valid question to be asked to every parliamentarian, especially. So that is number one. We should be doing that. We should be requiring the British government to lead and actually, shall we say, live up to the story it tells the world about British values. That's the first step that we should be doing. And the second conversation that we have to start is the conversation about partitioning Bangladesh. The reasons for which Bangladesh or East Pakistan were created and Pakistan were created were to protect a minority. In Bangladesh, there is a minority who have been on the receiving end of state-sponsored, state-protected violence and loss of their rights for a long time. If it's required, why not partition Bangladesh and give the minorities a separate state? Where the conversation has started that Pakistan cannot be trusted to prevent the atrocities against the Sindhis, the Balochis and others, and they should have their own separate states. Within a very short space of time, if that were to happen, we would see clearly who the violence was coming from. We would see clearly that an independent Sindh or an independent Balochistan, what sort of a country do they build for themselves? I assure you that they wouldn't be attacking their neighboring countries. They wouldn't be supporting terrorism. So there is a legal and a moral argument to consider these as solutions for the innocent people in those countries, because they are under a great deal of violence at this moment in time. Something has to be done. They're the two action points that I would suggest everybody start to talk about. Partition Bangladesh, economic sanctions against Bangladesh. Human rights requires those to be considered.
Satish ji, I agree with you, but don't you think that human rights are a tool only used for some purposes? For example, Bangladesh has done these things now, but Pakistan is doing continuously all these things against minorities. Every other day we hear about the destruction of a mandir or a church or a gurdwara, but there is no economic sanctions. Pakistan invaded Afghanistan through Taliban, and yet we are not talking against Pakistan. And about 12 to 15 foreign ministers have visited Pakistan since then, including foreign minister of United Kingdom, Denmark, Netherlands. So we cannot stop it with just speaking about sanctions. I don't know how to go through all these things. I will come back to you, Satish ji. First, I have a question for Rashmi ji. Rashmi ji, you are sitting in India. In India, there are 1 billion Hindus, but I think hardly 10% of them are real Hindus, 90% of them are seculars. For example, we see that a Hindu actor, Arman Kohli, is in jail on drugs charges since months. Husband of Shilpa Shetty went to jail for some purposes. Nobody said that they are in jail for Hindus. But when it comes to Shah Rukh Khan's son, Aryan Khan, we immediately come up that because he is Muslim, he is in jail, while he was caught red handed. So, how to convince these secular or secular Hindus of all these atrocities and this global Hindu phobia?
Arifji, you make a good point, but I think it's not 90% of Hindus who are secular. I think it's just the 10% who are secular, liberal, and whatever, but they seem to have captured the space where you can make the most noise. So they're just empty vessels making a lot of noise. I think the need of the hour is for the silent majority Hindus who are actually sensible to speak up and to and to actively participate in activism and and to propagate Hindu ideas, because I think 90% of the Hindus, we just put our head down, we work really hard, we we ensure that that we live a good life, our neighbors live a good life, we're just like in a very sort of a safe space, and we try to just have that life wherein we don't interfere above our limitation. I think we need to stop limiting ourselves and actually speak up, because if we do, I think the silent majority, in front of the silent majority, the so-called Indian liberals will have no space to stand, because I think most people are usually sensible, well-meaning, and have a right idea about everything. I mean, even myself, I was such a big part of the silent majority before this happened to me. And now that, I've been through something like this, it's such a lived experience that I cannot bear the thought of not speaking up for other Hindus. I only wish that other Hindus do not have to go through something as traumatic as I went through, or other Hindus, go through to actually speak up. Because if we don't wait for something terrible to happen to us and actually speak up now, then maybe we can actually skip a lot of suffering in the future as a community. So I think that is that's how the facts stand. And the people you just see right now, all of this Bollywood, they're just empty vessels, and they're just 10% of the population. It's just that they seem to have they seem to have captured all the loudspeakers in the country, both figuratively and literally. And I think that's the only issue.
Arifa, if I can add one little thing, which I think Rashmiji also will resonate with, and that is that it's natural not to be an activist. The natural state of a human being is to be a contented, happy human being working for everyone's benefit. This is what's natural. And the vast majority of people who you call Hindus are actually like that. They wouldn't want to harm or hurt anybody else. But you have to change gear when you are being attacked. And that's the problem. The difficulty is that most Hindus don't realize what it is that's being attacked and who is doing the attacking, and also how valuable it is. When you have the freedom to think and the freedom to speak, and the freedom to pursue any religious tradition that you wish to, you don't value it until it's taken away from you. What's happening in Bangladesh is that freedom is being taken away from them. You know, the extremists in Bangladesh, they are doing completely what they have been taught to do. They have been taught what is shirk. They have been taught what is a kufar. And so from their point of view, they are actually doing exactly what they think is right. But it needs other people to be able to say to them that actually you are denying the freedom of a human being to explore who they are, how they got here, and that's the greatest freedom in history. This is what Hindus have. It's about time they learned that one, it must be valued, and two, it must be defended and protected. And if you don't have a square meter of land which you can say is yours, where you can stand and protect those freedoms, then you will see how quickly those freedoms disappear, like they have in every other extremist theocratic country.
Thank you, Satish ji. Now I would welcome Mr. Manish ji, Malviya ji. Manish ji, what is your take on all this, and what is your question for Rashmi ji or Satish ji?
Thank you very much, Arif ji, for giving me an opportunity to come here. I mean, I'd like to say a few things about Reach first. It has been, we'll talk about at least 2 years back. There used to be a lot of things which I never used to like, what's happening around, but I never had any platform or from where I can raise my voice. So it has been, it's like कि मैं अकेला क्या कर सकता हूँ. But now being part of Reach, and thanks to you, Gaurav ji, and the whole Reach team, I got an opportunity. At least I'm part of a team who is defending, and two things basically which we talk about. First is being nationalist, and second being Sanatani. So both these things, used to be on top of my head all the time, but I never had the any medium to vent out things, whatever was inside me. So thanks a lot for that one to start with. Namaskar, Panditji, and Namaskar, Rashmiji.
Pranam ji, Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram. The question with I don't have a question, but I've got some observation, and I'd like to have a views on that. No, whatever is happening in Bangladesh, whatever has happened now, we know that there was a guy Iqbal who came up with the Quran and put it in Pandal, and then he said, "Beadbi ho rahi hai." Now this Beadbi thing that has been going around places. Wherever you don't like anybody, just say Beadbi, which happened in north of Delhi as well. Beadbi hui, and they cut that guy into pieces, right? So this Beadbi thing is happening, and because of that, they just put this word, and then they start looting things. They will rape women, they will kill people, and then after some time, unki bhavna shant ho jati hai when they have done all these things. I mean, if you look back, one step back, this now they are saying that this boy, he's mentally unstable, Charsi hai, and he did this thing, and now they're apologizing, whatever they are doing. But don't you think that this thing is happening for last 1,000 years? Can we call everybody as as mentally unstable people, right from Gauri, Ghazni, and anybody? They came, they will loot the things, and they will say, okay, now that has happened. Let's just put the things in the past. To me, I think this is a I'll say way of handling their berojgari. They will come, they can't do things, and they can't compete with people. So just stay there for 3-4 years, and then attack a place and loot all the shops, burn them, and then your bhavnas are they are taken care of. So what do you think? Is it not the same pattern which has been repeating for for more than 1,000 years now?
If the question is to me, yes, it is. The thing about a criminal is that a criminal is a bad person. There are genuinely people on this earth who are bad, evil people. How many people who are in the audience have got locks on their doors? Right? At night time, you close the door and you lock it. Why do you lock it if the world is full of really lovely people who we should be embracing and supporting and nurturing and all of this nonsense? Bad people do bad things and then they lie in order to get away with them so they can do them again and again and again. The only people who should be having a voice at this moment in time are the people who are the victims. It's only their voice that should be heard. Why on earth do we need to understand the psychosis of the person who is inflicting, who is perpetrating these crimes against innocent people? I don't want to know. The first thing I want is those people who have been injured is they should be safe. As much as is possible, provision should be made for them to rebuild their shattered, destroyed lives. They must be heard and they must be dealt with first. And when we've expended all of the state's resources on putting those poor Bangladeshi citizens back onto their feet and making them feel safe, if there's any money left over, then let's talk about rehabilitating this person who is a Jadsi and everything else. It's a nonsense, it's a fallacy, it's a fraud. It's an ongoing exercise in deceit and deception to continuously make this mistake. And this is not something that we as Hindus should allow anymore. I was chatting with my friends at ISKCON about this issue, and I reminded them that they are a little bit at fault because they refuse to believe what their enemy was saying to them. Their enemy says very clearly, this is what a kufr is, this is what a shirk is. And the solutions for those is also taught to them at an early age. And by pretending that's not the truth, you don't actually achieve anything except arrange for your own vulnerability. And I'm hoping now that all of the people who are engaged in the bhakti movement, who seem to have this understanding or misunderstanding, that Krishnji is going to materialize, that Vishnu avatar aayega aur hame bachayega. Right? Krishnji says it very clearly in the Gita. I will sit in the chariot at the back, but I will not lift a weapon because this is your fight to fight. You exist to be able to defend Dharma, to defend vulnerable people, to defend the ancestral traditions which have healed the earth. This is for you to do. And that's what we should all understand. And the refusal to react, to act and respect what is real, that is a mansik kamzori. It is a mental illness when people are saying and teaching, we want to erase you from the earth because that's our divine mission. Right? When people are saying that and you say, no, it's not true. And so they go and kill a few of your fellow Hindus, and you still say, no, it's not true. Who is the one who is mentally unstable? It's a very real question to ask. And one of the most important things that we should really recognize now, because history makes it quite clear, is that if there is Islamophobia, then I want to talk about kufrophobia. I want to talk about mushrik phobia. I want to talk about all of those things which are in scriptures which incite hatred against Hindus. Let's have that conversation. I think we have to do that. I've been accused of Islamophobia so many times because I know the history of what happened in Bharat. Guru Gobind Singh was not an Islamophobe. the gurus who Banda Bahadur, they were not Islamophobes. They were defending innocent people who wanted the right to exist with freedom. So this whole argument, we need to take a stand. We need to engage with it. We need to have the difficult conversations. We need to start the difficult conversations, and only then can we guarantee that some semblance of peace and safety for Sanatanis will continue for a while longer. It's up to us to do it. The Christianists won't do it. The Islamists won't do it. The capitalists who are still trying to colonize the world won't do it. It's up to those who genuinely have supported human rights for 4,000-5,000 years, the people of Sanatan Dharma and the people of that land going back thousands of years, all of those people of that origin. It's our job to do this. We have to do this. Nobody else can.
Thank you, Panditji.
Satish ji.
Yeah.
Rashmi ji, I have lived in Belgium and I have seen that common Belgian people, they hate Hitler because he was an invader and he committed atrocities in Belgium. But India is a unique country where invaders are glorified. My question to you, because you are a student, but you are being taught distorted history of Bharat. So, how can you change it? How can you persuade the government to bring true history? And second thing is that in India there are madrasas that teaches Islamic extremism. There are convent schools of churches, but there are no gurukuls. So why Hindus are not allowed to teach their children Hinduism or Sanatan, and how can you change all this?
I think, Arifji, Hindus were fed this idea that just because they're more in number in India, that they need to make way for everybody else to thrive. So we went on making extra, going way beyond our, we stretched our limits to accommodate people of other identities, other religions who are not indigenous to India, to accommodate them. We stretched our limbs far too wide. We went so far as replacing most of our history with their history, with how they came to India and how they invaded India. And we actually glorified it because we didn't want to offend them now that they were our brothers and sisters. And we've glorified them so much that many of our cities, important cities, and roads are also named after these invaders. We've reached that point. Whilst what you say is completely true that invaders are shunned and looked down upon everywhere else in the world, but the good Sanatanis, we just take everything for face value. Anything and everyone says to us, and we're like, Hanji, so we don't want to hurt your sentiments. So, let it be, let the bygones be, the invaders, your ancestors, they invaded, they brutalized my ancestors, but I'm just going to forget that and go on. And I'm going to go as far as replacing my history so that your children don't have to read all of this and then get offended. I think we've reached that point, and it's hilarious because it's being weaponized against Hindus right now. Instead of using that as a point of integration and reconciliation, it is being weaponized and used as a tool to erase Hindus, and that is very concerning. That's why we need to undo um, all of these mistakes that we have committed in the past, and set the record straight for who was an invader and what our real history was and what the Hindus have gone through. I'm quite hopeful that the new education policy, the NEP, will make inroads in this matter so that we can learn about our glorious empires, about the glorious Vijayanagara Empire, about how we had the empire, the Gandhara kingdom in Afghanistan, and the true sense of Bharatvarsh which existed before the invaders came in, so that we can truly understand our history and then use it as a basis to identify threats in the current society as we live. So I think I'm quite hopeful. I think I'm an eternal optimist, courtesy wonderful people like Panditji that I surround myself with. So I think I'm still hopeful that things are going to change for the best and that dharma will prevail.
Panditji, Tushar is asking, yesterday I read your book about caste system. Very well written. Before going to conclusion remarks, I would ask Hirdesh ji, Gayatri ji, and Manish ji if they have anything to add
Yep.
or question.
मेरे को मेरा एक क्वेश्चन था. Just wanted to understand, if you look at it for 20, 30 years, 40 years, there was a lot of oil in the Middle East, and they had a lot of money, and they pumped all that money for glorifying Islam and doing whatever things are happening around Middle East, India, and Afghanistan. Whatever, a lot of funds have been coming out, right? And they have been supporting, using those funds, what do you call zakat, where even from their profits, they have to give some money. But in May 10 to 15 years time frame, when this oil is going to will not be so important, because everything is moving to alternative energy sources and batteries and electric cars. So once this thing oil consumption goes down, obviously those interests will be going down. So do you think that that is going to impact the further expansion of Islam?
Can I take that question because of my background, my limited background in renewable energy? Well, I think through I hold a degree in energy systems and I've studied renewable energy. So one of the biggest investors currently in alternative energy are the oil companies. I think this is something that we all need to know. So basically, they also know that they have no future. So they've been investing from way before this renewable energy became mainstream. And because they have that amount of money with them, because they've been earning for so long, they do have a good amount of deposit, and they've been reinvesting that into renewable energy. So I think entirely depending on a shift of dynamics when it comes to energy would be a fallacy on the part of dharmic. So I mean that could somehow contribute in one way or the other. But as of now, the facts stand that one of the biggest investors in renewable energy are the oil companies, and people from that industry. So they are evolving, and but I think the major solution to the issue would just be Hindus and dharmics vocalizing their opinions, putting their foot down and asserting that this is not okay, being treated unfairly is not okay, is going to be the way forward.
One more point I just wanted to make, like glorifying Islam has been reduced now, and we can see that Yogi Adityanath has been voicing out very vocally in India. And the recent towns, for example, like Allahabad has been named as Prayagraj, and today I see that Faizabad has been renamed as Ayodhya Cant. So these this shows that you have to become an apologetic Hindu, and as well as we are living in a generation where we need to connect with our Sanatani roots, and that's where we should go forward. We are not in a Mughal era. Yeah, that's the interject I wanted to. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I have one question to Panditji. Panditji, I'm going back to our topic of Bangladesh, what's happening there, right? One side we can see that the extremist, the Islam extremist, they were targeting this Hindu minority and the others also. And other side we see that there's a political parties involvement. If you look at the BNP, there's the opposition party, they are fueling this fire. So, what is the basically is it the generated by the opposition party to bring down the government, or is it just a example of the extremism is happening in Bangladesh? What's your view on this?
It's a very powerful question, but the answer to it, a genuine answer, can only be found in a philosophical consideration. Okay, a democracy is built on two principles. One principle is that the majority of human beings are sensible. You know, a minority can go a little bit crazy, a minority can become extreme. And so the West said, well, the best way we can prevent this is, it's a Latin phrase, vox populi, vox deus. The word and the voice of the people is God speaking. Okay. Now, if you put that into a political space, then what happens is you start to think, well, let's get the majority opinion together and we will go by the majority. That way we remove the extremists. So that's one principle of a democracy. And if you don't have that principle there, it's not a democracy, it's a facade. The second principle in a democracy is called losers' consent. And that means that both people, both parties, agree that democracy is the most important. And if we lose, then we will say that the majority of the people, their will is being exercised. And so we give consent as the losers for the will of the people to happen. Now, if those two are not present in a democratic system or a democratic political structure or a society or a country, it's not a democracy. Okay. Now, people who support a religious ideology, they're never Democrats. They cannot believe in a democracy. They believe in a dictator who's invisible and in the sky, and his word was heard 2,000 years ago, and you have to believe it. That's not the voice of the people. The majority of the people, they live lives with each other. They live lives with mixed communities and they learn from each other, and it's natural for society to move forward on experience. But those who believe in a theocracy, which are the Islamists and the Christianists, they're not democratic, and democracy needs to be protected from them. They should not be allowed to acquire political power through violence. And that's what they always do. It must be remembered that theocracies are always established with violence, but you have to use force to defeat a theocracy. This is just history speaking, nothing more than that. So when you look at what's happening in Bangladesh and in Pakistan, you actually don't have democracies at all. There is no losers' consent. There is no voice of the people, but they pretend that the democracies, in order to be able to carry on what they're doing, without the Western nations acting and saying, whoa, 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 hang on a minute, this is a threat to us. So India should treat Bangladesh from that point of view. And the BNP have a horrific history. The BNP's history is as bad as the history of the Nazi Party. The BNP's history, it was under the BNP when millions of acres of land was just seized from Hindus. It was under the BNP that I think 40% of the 1.2 million households were seized from Hindus, and 40% were taken by BNP members. These are not the acts of democratic people and democratic organizations. These are the acts of totalitarianism. These are the acts of dictators, but they hide and protect themselves by saying we're doing this because of religion. And it's about time humanity learned this, and certainly the West needs to learn it. You can't defeat dictators with democratic means. That's the question in front of every civilization at this moment in time. How do we defeat dictators who are a threat to democracy and the will of the majority of the people?
That's leading to one more question. So when you have given the reference of Pakistan and Bangladesh, right? But can we compare Pakistan with Bangladesh? In Pakistan, totally the collapse countries. Basically, the government doesn't have the power. The power lies in the army. But in case of Bangladesh, the government is really, really strong, and the army is not that powerful, and that's an elected government and it's not the forced government. What we see in the news, basically. So here the government is not very extremist kind of thing, but still they are not able to control. So how we are comparing with Pakistan with Bangladesh? They're two different country and different.
They're exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I'll share with you why they're the same. Because what is an army except a large number of people carrying weapons and using violence to impose their decision on other people? That's what an army is, isn't it?
Yeah.
In Bangladesh, in 22 Pargans, 22 districts, violence just erupted. That were men being violent and attacking other people. Isn't that what an army does? Isn't that what a battle is all about? It's the use of physical force against each other. And so if you have a look at the number of people who are willing to use violence, who can be motivated to act in order to attack other peoples, that's what an army is. Although it's not an official army, it is still men who are carrying machetes and attacking another group under the guidance of their leaders, under the guidance of those who inspire them. That's what an army does. If you look at it at its tattva, that is what an army is. In Pakistan, there is a formal army because the British created the Pakistani army to protect British interests in that part of the world. Bangladesh came into existence as a sort of a side event in the partition of Bharat, but it came into existence with the intention of being not India. It's a country which was created on a negative, and something which is created on a negative can never be prosperous. You know, something which is a natural identity, a Bharatiya identity, an American native indigenous identity, the Australian identities, all of these are indigenous organic identities. Anything which exists as not them is negative, and it can never produce tranquil, harmonious people. The problem is who they think they are, and who is it who teaches them that this is what you are. The solution to all of this is very simple. If I was given a magic wand and said, okay, Satish ji, say a mantra and it will happen. Okay, if that were to happen, it would be very simple. For one generation, do not let clerics anywhere near children until the children are 18 years old. That's it. Bas itna hi kaam hai. Sab kuch ho jayega naturally.
In the end, I would like to take closing remarks from Rashmi ji, from Pandit ji, or anyone else. What message do you put forward to Indians in India and Indians outside India?
Taking context from the Bangladeshi situation, the Hindus there are in a really, really bad state. I'm in touch with a few young Hindus on the ground in Bangladesh right now, and they tell me how bad the situation is, and that the attacks have started again since Friday. So I think the least we can do as the Hindu community is raise awareness about this situation and use every avenue that we have, every platform, be it offline or online, to do something that can aid them. And just mere, raising awareness is also going to help because, they're going through a lot, and no, it's not even considered, it's not even counted. It's not even counted as if they're real humans. So let's give them that dignity and do our best. So just a request to everyone to, to raise awareness about the Bangladeshi situation where Hindus are being killed and attacked on a daily basis.
Pandit ji?
Ji, my closing remarks are very simple. One is demand economic sanctions against Bangladesh. That's formal sanctions. But secondly, let's start the process by informal sanctions. When you go to buy your next kurta pajama, have a look. Does it say made in Bangladesh on it? If it doesn't, then recognize that you're paying money to support a regime and an economy which has enshrined in it hatred for Hindus. And that has to be stopped. And each and every one of us can do this. So just remember, sanction Bangladesh, and then they might become genuinely desirous of protecting their minorities.
Anyone else?
Yeah, very, very well pointed out Panditji and Rashmiji. And yes, being a diaspora in UK, we will raising our voice. We will be vocal, and that's what we can do. We cannot go to Bangladesh to fight for it, but yes, we can write to our MPs. We can wake up to our friend and all the colleague in UK, and that we were doing, and we are very active in the social media. We'll do it, and very well point by Panditji. If you look at this Bangladeshi restaurants also here, people they never call it the Bangladeshi, they call it the Indian restaurant, Indian
That's
cuisine.
right.
Yeah. So we need to be mindful now. We need to find out just before you are visiting any restaurant, just make sure just do the Google search and find out who is the owner of it. And that's the indirect, the informal way of hitting them hard, because we don't want to support who is going to who is just killing our friends and our Hindus in Bangladesh.
In the end, I will thank everyone for joining us, and I hope that we have put a message forward. Thank you very much, and Jai Shri Ram, Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Jai Shri Ram.
Arif Bhai, thank you for your courage. Your courage has made other people courageous. Rashmiji, thank you for your courage. It too has infected other people, and I'm hoping that our watchers will also become more courageous in the service of Dharma and harmony and humanity. So Jai Shri Ram, Arif Bhai, thank you very much, and my best wishes for the Reach family.
Thank you so much, Panditji. We look forward for your guidance
Yes,
in social media, in every platform, and please guide us on what to do, our action items and all. So definitely looking forward. Thank you.
And a special thanks to Rashmi ji. You are the youth icon. You have given the inspiration to many, many. So keep working hard. And now everybody look after you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Yeah,
having
just on
me.
those lines,
Jai Shri
मेरी
Ram.
दोनों लड़की आपकी बहुत बड़ी फैन है रश्मि जी.
Very kind of you. Namaste.
Vande
Namaste.
Mataram. Jai Shri Ram.
Vande Mataram. Thanks.